When the Aum Shinrikyo gained official recognition, it took shelter beneath a well-established and corrupt system of patronage. They set up in a quiet dairy farming community. The Aum now boasted 10,000 followers throughout Japan, and nearly 1,000 settled here at Kamikuishiki. Inside, sect members were undergoing survival training. Chemicals and drugs were used to raise, then remove states of anxiety. Other techniques of mind control included hours of chanting and listening to tapes like this.
朝原翔くんです。使用するぞ、使用するぞ、使用するぞ、使用するぞ、使用するぞ、記録を積むぞ、記録を積むぞ、記録を積むぞ、記録を積むぞ、記録を積むぞ、瞑想するぞ、瞑想するぞ、瞑想するぞ、瞑想するぞ、瞑想するぞ。今の苦しみは原因である。この修行によって今の苦しみを打ち砕くことができる。
Followers paid thousands of dollars to be blessed by Asahara, to drink his blood or tea brewed from his hair. This simulation shows how nerve gas released that night from a car park enveloped the neighbourhood, killing 7 people and putting hundreds in hospital. It came through the garden of Yoshiyuki Kono, who raised the alarm. The police remained paralysed, but by now many ordinary citizens were in open conflict with the cult. Here, an Aum member who kidnapped her father in order to have him sign over the family estate tries to stop him blowing the whistle on the sect. In March, they finally decided to raid Kamikuishiki. But 3 days before, Asahara received a tip-off and ordered a preemptive strike. Parcels of liquid sarin, wrapped together with a solvent that turns it into gas, are distributed to a dozen Aum commandos. Next morning, they board trains packed with commuters, choosing subway lines which converge on Tokyo's central government district. Just after 8 o'clock, the bundles are placed in the carriages, and the deadly cocktail mixed at the point of an umbrella. Japan is no longer the same. Sarin, a weapon too horrible even for nations at war, has been used by Japanese against fellow Japanese. The close feeling of identification which holds this complex society together, that human chemistry, has gone terribly awry.
Hello. How is everyone today? I hope that you are all doing very, very well. Today, I want to have a very important conversation about how to get children out of a cult. At the beginning of this, you watched a little blurb just now of a very well-known cult in Japan that did commit a terrorist attack on the subway system, as you heard, back in 1995. I want to talk about that for a moment because it's relevant to what's going on in Japan right now. This is the cult here, the Wikipedia page for it, if you will. I believe Blair Illuminati did a deep dive on this cult, so you can also go and check that out when you're done this. So watch this first, because I rock. And then what I want to do is I want to talk about what's going on in Japan right now, and then I want to talk about how you can actually get your child out of a cult as a parent. Unfortunately, it is something that all of us parents should be aware of, especially today. So this was in Japan, of course, as you saw. It was a Japanese doomsday cult. And it was founded by the gentleman who you saw in the video way back in 1987, which is the year after I was born. So 34 years ago, 35 years ago. I don't even know how old I am. It carried out the deadly Tokyo subway sarin attack in 1995, and it was also proven to be responsible for the Matsumoto sarin attack the previous year, which, of course, I'm sure it wasn't hard for them to prove that. The attacks were very, very similar. The group says that those who carried out attacks did so secretly without being known to other executives and ordinary believers. That's what they'll all say, right? The head of this cult insisted on his innocence in a radio broadcast relayed from Russia and directed toward Japan. On the 6th of July in 2018, that's how long it took. 2018, after exhausting all appeals, and that's why it took so long, they were appealing and appealing and appealing, the cult leader and 6 followers were executed as a punishment for the 1995 attacks and other crimes. And the remaining 6 on death row were executed on the 26th of July. At 12:10 a.m. on New Year's Day of 2019, at least 9 people were injured, 1 seriously, when a car was deliberately driven into crowds celebrating the New Year in Tokyo. Local police reported the arrest of, I'm going to butcher this name, and I really don't want to be disrespectful at all. Not that we care about respecting someone that hurts people, but you know. Kazuhiro Kazakabe, I'm assuming, the suspected driver who allegedly admitted to intentionally ramming his vehicle into crowds to protest his opposition to the death penalty, specifically in retaliation for the execution of the cult members that had been executed the year before, right? So as you can see, this thing technically is still around. It is still around. It right now, and as of 2007, but like even today, this moment right now, it is designated a terrorist organization by several countries, including Russia, Canada, which is where I am, Kazakhstan, as well as the European Union. It was previously designated by the US as a terrorist organization until 2022, so this year, when the State Department determined the group to be largely defunct as a terrorist organization, mainly because when they take out these terrorist attacks, even if they were to do it in the US, it wouldn't necessarily be a terrorist attack on another country. It's more of a cult doomsday attack. That's why I personally believe the US did that. I'm just throwing that out there. Otherwise, I'm sure that they would be like, no, this place is terrorist, because we know how the US treats, terrorist attacks, right? Yeah, see, Joe, It's funny, Joe. I meant to bring this up before I got into all this. I'm so sorry. When you typed this, it was right at the part where they started talking about the terrorist attack. And it was kind of funny because when I first started looking into this, I didn't really remember them either. I didn't remember until we got to the subway terrorist attack. And then I was like, oh my God, I've heard of this. I know what this is. I try not to watch a lot of Illuminati's cult stuff because I talk about cults and I don't want to like say the same thing. So I didn't watch that one of hers. But then when I saw this, I was like, yeah, I remember this. Yeah, normally they don't take that long in Japan. Yeah, I believe it's because they kept fighting it. Otherwise, it would have been done back in 1995. So although there was a lot that went on like before 1995 with this, after 1995, this cult basically changed leaders, changed names like 400 times. There were several people murdered due to this cult. People were abducted. There was a gentleman at the beginning who you saw, he was abducted by his own daughter and brought into the cult, made to sign over all of their possessions. And that's something that you see in cults a lot. When you go and you join, you're made to sign over like your whole mortgage, any finances you have, any stocks you have, anything like that, you sign over to the cult. And then he wanted to speak out against the cult, and you saw his daughter like flipping on him. These were all of the members that were executed on the 6th of July, 2018, which again, that's not a long time ago. You know? So just think about that. It's not that long ago. So this was on the 6th of July, and then these ones were on the 26th of July. Technically, this cult is still going. It is still going on in Japan. It's hard to shut down the cult, as we know. All you can do is spread awareness, spread education, tell people not to join this thing, look out for your loved ones for any signs, which we'll get into. And then the police, for example, can charge them for any crimes that they commit. But even with their head follower now executed, or their head leader, now executed, they can continue on. And we see this all the time. They have had a lot of crimes since 1995. And we don't know if it's going to end anytime soon. I mean, they've been kind of quiet for a few years now, but that doesn't mean anything. And unfortunately, recently, there was actually a warning in Japan. And I want to talk about that because I think it's very important for us also here to do these warnings. I mean, we kind of warn about cults, but not as much as I would like us to. So when I saw this warning from Japan about college kids that were being indoctrinated into cults, I, of course, think of all of the countries and what's happening with kids being indoctrinated into cults. I think of multi-level marketing companies and how us parents are told to get our kids involved, right? I think of all of those things, and then I become very horrified, and I want to look into how we can stop that from happening. So just recently, on the 13th of August, this happened. This is coming from Tokyo. It says, as cults continue to deploy multiple schemes to recruit young people on Japan's university campuses, which is disgusting. I wish the cults would fuck off and leave all of the campuses alone. But we even know that here, they love campuses, even for MLMs. You will see Amway hit up university and college campuses and try to recruit people all the time. It's kind of scary. And it, of course, heightens parents' fears, which I don't know if we should ever not be scared of that. I think that we really do need to educate our youth on cults and on groupthink and on critical thinking skills and all of these things and how to not join these cults. A specialist has explained to the Minichi Simban common signs that could indicate their children are being sucked in. It's difficult to convey the dangers of cults to today's students who have no memory of the one that we just discussed that happened in 1995. In 1995, I was 9. So I barely remembered this happening. Like I said, until I got to the part of my research, I watched a whole bunch of videos on it before I did this stream. And until I got to the part in the video where they were talking about the subway, I had no clue. I was like, oh, a brand new one I've never heard of before. So a lot of people don't remember. And a lot of the people, since I'm like 36, right? And I was 9 when this happened. A lot of people that are in university and college right now were not even born yet when this happened. And so unfortunately, people are not aware. It's the same out here. A lot of people were not born for the Manson family. So we still have to raise awareness about that cult because that mistake can be made over and over again. Or Jonestown. So we have to raise awareness about Jonestown still, even though, it's no longer really a cult. Still have to talk about it because history likes to repeat itself. And the only way you can stop that from happening is education and awareness. So because of this, of course, a lot of the students now don't know about those cults. And unfortunately, I don't know if we're doing enough in our society, not even just in Japan, even here in Canada, in the US, in the UK, everywhere. I don't know if we're doing enough to teach our kids to stay away from these or how to see the signs. I don't know. I've been sitting here for what now? We're going on 3 years? Oh, Lord. Talking about it. And I don't know. Are we spreading enough awareness? Joe says, as an old fart, it becomes history and you forget. And that's the thing, right? And you don't really think of it. And something like this kind of goes to the back of our minds. I don't think any of us want to believe either that our kids could join a cult, right? Like it's a weird thing. So we don't really think of that often and as something that we should be teaching our kids. I worry that our world isn't even teaching kids how to do proper critical thinking anymore. So, it's a worrisome thing. So again, since most college kids today and university students all over the place, they were born after this, born after Jonestown, born after Charles Manson, born after a lot of these cults. And it seems like something that happened back then. But unfortunately, the manipulative methods of the Unification Church, formerly known as the Family Federation for World Peace and Unification, caused so much trouble in the 1980s that it became a social issue. But present-day university students remain largely unaware about the religious group until the suspect in the assassination of former Prime Minister Shinzo Abe told police that he deeply resented the church for destroying his family. A lot of people don't know about Eckankar and how it is a cult, which is why I'm diving into it. because it's still going very strong today. And it's another one that is going to be preying on youth. I see it going to universities and colleges and trying to get people to sign up, unfortunately. Cases of cults recruiting young people at universities and on the streets have been confirmed this year, too. We're talking this year, 2022. Though it's said that cults have their eye on first-year students at welcome parties, people become targets regardless of time, place, or age. Again, horrifying. The thing about cults is that there is not someone who is the perfect victim for them, okay? They'll use anything against anyone to get them to join. Nobody is actually safe from being recruited. There have been instances of cult following alumni or students searching social media hashtags to target young people who have announced what university they will enter in the spring. They aim to recruit the new students to their cult after establishing a relationship of trust by guiding them through school procedures, such as signing up for courses. So that's something that I think all of us should be aware of, not just people in Japan. Like I said, all of us are going to have kids, or we have kids that are going to be attending or are attending college, university, even in high school, by the way, they also prey on. Watch your kids' social media. If they're announcing things like this out into the world, watch who responds, watch how they talk to each other, all of that. You never know. And it would be horrifying to think that that's happening. But unfortunately, welcome to 2022. As remote classes have grown common amid the coronavirus pandemic, it adds a whole new layer of issues because cults have been targeting students who tend to get isolated, which at the time of the coronavirus pandemic, that was everyone. In some cases, students are lured into cults by alumni they met through job hunting apps. It's kind of why I bring up Amway a lot, because Amway is known for being on LinkedIn and all the other job hunting apps, putting out an ad, telling people that they're looking for someone to work in marketing in their business. And then you show up and you realize they want you to sign up for Amway. But sometimes you don't get to the third or fourth interview with them until it's apparent what it is. They're very good at tricking people into thinking that they're applying for a real job position until like the very last minute. And unfortunately, sometimes people are so far invested by then that they feel like they can't say no. It's a weird thing that happens, but it happens. In another case, a student who applied for a speech contest via social media was approached by a party claiming they could receive money for participating. To combat these issues, since 2006, Osaka University has made it mandatory, and I think this is fabulous. I don't know anywhere else where this is mandatory, by the way, and I think that this should be mandatory everywhere, which is partially why I'm doing this video. Because when I heard Japan was doing this, I was like, why aren't we doing this? How come we don't have classes at high schools and universities and colleges, just a quick little workshop where we tell kids the dangers of cults, what to look out for, and how to leave them if they end up in one. You know what I mean? This should be a thing everywhere. Because they're doing an orientation course that includes 45 minutes dedicated to warning students about cults. Send your kids to Osaka University. I love it. Great idea. Students get explanations on the characteristics of clubs and groups that they should be wary of, such as having bases off campus and going through frequent name changes. And these are things that, of course, they should know to look out for. Unfortunately, when you're in college and university, you're joining clubs like crazy, right? And so they prey on that. And I think it would be amazing. Japan is ahead of us. I know, in everything. In everything. Excuse me. No, it's such an amazing idea. I have talked about how we need to learn how to kind of reach the youth, even kids. Unfortunately, preteens are now starting to get recruited into MLMs and cults. They're trying to indoctrinate them at a young age, right? And your preteen years, right before high school, it's probably when kids are the most vulnerable, entering high school and that, right? Or like here, entering university or college, because that's the first time kids are kind of out on their own. It's their first taste at being an adult, being independent. So they prey on that. We need this everywhere. It can be it can apparently be difficult. I am so sorry, I forgot how to read. To ascertain whether groups are cults, particularly when they present themselves as contributing to society through volunteering and other activities. And I saw Joe bring up Ash, so I'm going to bring up Oh Bless. You will notice that all MLMs, all cults have some kind of either fundraising agency, right? Or they will have a straight up counseling agency, a retreat agency, some kind of foundation or organization dedicated to volunteering or helping. And this is why. Once students join such groups, they start to talk about matters unrelated to their original objectives, such as ways to make your life and mindset positive. So again, I think we need to teach our kids this. How should parents and families respond if their children accidentally fall on with cults at a university? They created a whole goddamn pamphlet that they pass out. Look at this, a pamphlet created by the Japan Society for Cult Prevention and Recovery, which informs parents about signs that may indicate their child is involved in a cult, shown in this image provided by the group. Love it. Love it. I adore this. I really do think that this is necessary everywhere. Everywhere. 9 behavioral signs of cult involvement. An excessive increase in appreciative pronouncements, unusual levels of excitement, numerous invitations to unidentifiable events, cutting ties with friends and family, by the way, an increase in full day outings, rising mysterious expenses, disposing of once cherished belongings, following a dramatic change in taste, a sudden decrease in time spent with family, and suddenly saying they want to quit living at home. The group warns that parents should be on their guard if even one of the above applies to their children. Summer vacation is a good opportunity to pick up on danger signs that your child might be on the verge of joining a cult, says Tachikaki. I'm going to say it wrong, but he's a cult expert. He was on my thumbnail there. And it's important not to accuse them, even if you notice abnormal behavior. I'm going to repeat that again. Do not go up to your kids and accuse them. The cults take measures to deal with parents' disapproval. This aggravates relationships between parents and children and drives the latter even deeper into cult activities. The most effective method is to talk about it with consultation desks at schools and expert institutions. So, I think that this is absolutely fabulously amazing. I think that we all need to figure out how to get pamphlets like this made, put into as many schools as we can in every single country as we can. Fabulous idea. Add cult education to orientation at colleges and universities. I love it. I love it. that is a great way for us to start fighting this as soon as we can, as best as we can. This is Osaka University professor, and he's also a cult expert as well. Like, he works at the university and he knows the most about cults out of all of them there. So he's one of the people that are really helping put this together. And I think he is amazing. And again, we all need to do this. I am kind of like upset that we don't do this. Hello. Oh, look, Yoshi's watching me. I have Yoshi watching me from Super Mario. So it sounds like depression. Do you know what? That's the thing, is a lot of these signs do sound like the warning signs of depression. So either way, you should pay attention to them, because your kid is unfortunately either heading into being in a cult, or they could be heading into having mental health issues. Both of those things are very important to pay attention to. I just do feel like, for the most part, we do have a lot of education and awareness I mean, we could always use more, don't get me wrong, but there is a lot surrounding mental health in youth and in children and the likes, right? I don't feel like we have enough when it comes to cults. And unfortunately, right now in our world, we are kind of seeing the first generation of kids that were made to grow up in cults. Cults like Scientology and the likes, we are having them now as grown adults leave these cults and speak out as to how it affected them as children. Being in a cult as a child can give you my mental health disorder. It can mess you up so much. And I just feel like it's really important that we protect our youth and children from this, even in terms of the commercial cults and MLMs. I talk about how when I was in Sensi and It Works, they really wanted me to use my daughter to do ads and that kind of thing. That's not good. That needs to stop, because then what you're doing is you're indoctrinating your child into thinking that that's okay. So when your child grows up, they then don't know that these are all warning signs of a cult, because them and mom used to post up Sensi on the internet together and it was just all fun. Right? And that's kind of what's going on in our world. Is unfortunately, we grew up in a time when MLMs were very accepted. So we've lost being able to see these signs, if you will. I don't know if there ever was a time that we all knew what to look for and could protect everyone better. I think maybe this might be the best we've ever done. But it is a lot harder when things like MLMs become mainstream. Because again, talking about doomsday cults and religious cults, people usually hear that and they go, oh yeah, no, I don't want to be in like the Manson family or like Jonestown or whatever, right? But then they don't think of, yeah, I shouldn't be in Unique or It Works or Sensi either. Or Ekankar, So I do think it's important, because I'm not sure if all of the parents are educating their kids. Because like I said, I don't know if we all know that we should be. I don't know whose fault it is, but it's kind of like, what do you educate your kid on? There's so much that parents have to protect their kids from, right? That I think that cults kind of get lost. You're busy protecting your kids, especially when they go off to university and college, from like so many different things, right? You're having all these different talks with your kids as they're growing up about how to not, end up pregnant before they're married or something, or, like there's just a lot of things that parents are already teaching their kids. I don't know if cults is really at the top of that list, because I don't know if we've really realized how serious of an issue it is and how many there are. And that's scary. But since we are unfortunately in countries that are not Japan, because like I said, Japan seems to be ahead of us in this, educating the youth I think it's amazing. I think we should all start to discuss how we can get this as a thing in all countries. Like, honestly, just 45 minutes or an hour, or even 2 hours of the orientation, being dedicated to cults would be so helpful in educating young people. I think we should have people going to high schools and giving, lots of talks at high schools about how kids shouldn't join and what to look out for. And of course, like, even in public school, maybe we should be teaching parents how to educate their kids going forward, when their kids are in public school. I don't know. I just think it's an interesting thing that we should talk about. But what is it that you do, right? When your kid, I know cults are based. I know we should just let everyone join them. Number one is not becoming or getting her pregnant. But that's what I mean. It's like there are so many things that you're protecting your kids from, right? Like, especially when they're going off on their own for the first time. I don't think that, especially today, cults is at the top of the list. So this would be helpful. Japan is definitely ahead on education and technology and probably everything. We got to give credit where credit's due. But what do you do if you do think that your kid is going to be in a cult? Because unfortunately, these pamphlets are in Japanese. And I don't read Japanese. So I have found the actual spiritual abuse resource website. And they have this fabulous write-up that I want to go through with you now about how to talk to your kids. If you think that you have a teenager or a young adult, because usually it's a teen or a young adult, and again, preteens count. I'm telling you, the MLMs are coming for 13 and 12-year-olds already in lots of different places. Be weary of it. Be weary. They're trying to get kids to join at 16 in a lot of places. So, what do you do? Because we just read an article that had this great pamphlet and all this advice in Japanese. And then they were basically like, but don't approach your kid and accuse them. So I'm sure all of you are like, okay, well, that's great, but what the fuck am I supposed to do, right? So let's talk about that, because I feel like I would be doing us all a disservice if we didn't actually have that talk. And this is probably I've searched for the most, like, the best information that I can find. And I feel like this really touches on some really great things that even us as so-called advocates, or those of us that spread awareness and discuss these things, there's some stuff for us to think about when we go through this as well. So this is Michael Langon. He has his PhD. And this site is actually the Spiritual Abuse Resources site. So if you have been in a spiritual / religious cult, this is the website that does, like, this organization does, like, the studies of it. They have all the people that have their PhDs in these types of things. You know what I mean? So this is the place that you want to go for some information. It's a great resource. And one of the things that it talks about on here that I found very interesting for all of us, like I said, even us just advocates or whatever you want to call us, is this part, the ethical considerations. This is an important thing to talk about, even as just people that speak out about this. It says, parents attempting to help their child voluntarily reevaluate his cult involvement face an apparent ethical dilemma. On the one hand, they may condemn the cult for using deceptively manipulative techniques of persuasion and control on members. On the other hand, they may not be able to avoid at least a mild, partial use of such techniques in order to facilitate a voluntary reevaluation of cult involvement. And I thought that was interesting. As someone that speaks out about cults, it made me kind of sit down and think a little bit about my ethics and how I don't want to use any of these manipulative techniques of persuasion or control, and how I think all of us out here as advocates need to all be aware of that, very self aware of that, and be careful of that. And I just thought this was a great way to bring that up. This dilemma is more apparent than real because the ethical propriety of techniques of persuasion and control depends upon the magnitude of deception and manipulation, the goals of interaction, and the context in which it takes place, which makes it a little bit confusing, doesn't it? Just a little bit. These three variables differ significantly in cultic and parent-child relationships. Figure 1, which presents a two-dimensional classification of social influences, processes, may shed some light on this issue. Sorry. So here's figure 1, and it says a two-dimensional classification of social influence processes. We have open, respectful, inspirational, personal development. Quadrant, group-centered goals versus person-centered goals. Exploitation, caretaker, quadrant again, and then extremely manipulative. The vertical dimension of this figure represents a continuum of methods of influence. On one end is total honesty and respect. On the other end is extreme manipulation. The horizontal dimension represents a goal continuum. The goal of the interaction can vary from completely person-centered to completely group-centered. The intersection of these two continua forms 4 quadrants, which are labeled in the figure. So again, you have to kind of be very careful of this. I feel like it's an important conversation to have where you're almost walking a thin line, aren't you? Because of our society's toleration of such cultic relationships, cultist parents will often feel much anger and frustration. That's okay. They are angry because they see their child being exploited, and they are frustrated because they feel helpless to do anything about it. And that's kind of how those ethics can get lost. I think it's very important when talking about this that you don't let those ethics get lost. I'll have to I'm sorry. I'm sorry, this is the biggest I can get it, Joe. I'm so sorry. Maybe I don't know. I don't know if it'll help though much. So again, you have to kind of keep your anger out of it, right? If you feel that anger, you feel that frustration, and it comes out when you're doing this with your child, not a good thing. So basically, if we all want to maintain our ethical bearings, parents, advocates, and the likes should continually monitor the ethical propriety of their actions. They should avoid using manipulative techniques of influence in order merely to fulfill their goals or needs, and they should make sure that a caretaker mode of relating is called for before resorting to manipulative methods aimed at fulfilling goals and needs of their child or of anyone, again, as an advocate. So, the best way to get somebody out of a cult or out of any group actually is by promoting voluntary reevaluation. Excuse me. The thing about this is that it is a therapy method. And it's even used in mental health. When I was working with clients that had schizophrenia, This is how we would kind of get them to realize that what they were hallucinating were hallucinations. You cannot walk up to someone with schizophrenia and just say to them, that person that you're seeing there and talking to is not real, because they will argue you. To them, it is very, very real. Unless they start voluntarily reevaluating how real that person is and their own mental health with the guide of a counselor, right? They will argue you. They will double down. Sometimes it can make them worse. This is the same when you're trying to get someone out of a cult. Like in that last article, to go up to someone and just say to them, hey, you're in a cult, you need to leave, blah, 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 is not going to do it. That's when you have a teenager who is now going to rebel against you, and they're going to go and climb their way up in that cult as much as possible just to show you you're wrong. That doesn't work. And it, by the way, this goes for all parenting. You can use this technique. I'm just saying. If you have them voluntarily reevaluate it on their own kind of thing, they have to come to these conclusions themselves. It has to be their ideas. It has to be their thoughts. Then it comes from them, right? Less chance of them arguing you, of doubling down, of rebelling against you, or the like. It's the best way to go about it. And that's what they're talking about when they say that we need to all promote voluntary reevaluation. This is the same even with adults. It's not even with children. If we're doing deep programming or exit counseling or the likes, this is the best way to do it. This can even be used when working with women that are in domestic violence or men that are in domestic violence situations. You have to have them voluntarily reevaluate it. If you tell someone they're being abused and they need to leave, they don't tend to listen until they're willing to admit it. And you can help that along, if you will. That's what we're talking about here. So, the first step of it is collecting information. So, what we need to do is, I'll just read this whole thing. I don't want to start like paraphrasing because this is like so important. So it says some workers in this field use the terms voluntary deprogramming or exit counseling to describe the helping process I describe. I prefer the term reevaluation counseling because it's not loaded, as are the other two. Makes sense. Parents are helping professionals who want to initiate a process of voluntarily deprogramming or exit counseling assume in the first case that the cultist is programmed, or in the second case that he should necessarily exit from the cult. Sometimes these assumptions may be warranted. Example, when the person is obviously troubled because of practices in a group known to be destructive. But frequently, this is not the case. More and more individuals caught up in cultic relationships belong to lesser known groups or to groups that are not clearly destructive, at least not to all members. Furthermore, the high level of negative news coverage concerning cults inclines some parents to deem a group destructive simply because it appears unorthodox. And that's something you have to be careful of doing. Therefore, I believe one more easily maintains his ethical bearings if he remains open to the possibility that the individual in question may not be a victim of a cultic relationship. Assuming plausible reasons for concern about one's child, a parent's goal should be to help the child make a voluntary, informed, reevaluation of his group involvement. Sorry, throughout this, they're going to say his group. Don't get mad. Most of us that are older were taught that if the person is not being gendered, and you mean all genders, you use his. They also mean her, they, them, all the non-binary terms. I don't want to hear the liberal shit in the comments, okay? Don't come for me for that. So, informed reevaluation of his group involvement, for example, to find out whether the concern is warranted and whether the child in question shares that concern after coming to understand it. Consequently, obtaining valid information is a critical aspect of any attempt to help a convert voluntarily reevaluate his involvement in a possibly cultic group. Parents have 6 primary sources of information to help them determine whether or not their child is the victim of a cultic relationship and to understand the nature of that relationship. Number 1 is readings, including publications of the group in question, as well as articles and books written about the group. Please do tons of research into it. Number 2, cult watcher organizations and individuals. Example, the Citizens Freedom Foundation and professionals knowledgeable about cults. Number 3, ex-members of the group in question. If you go on YouTube here even, and you type in the name of a cult, and then the word speaking out about, or ex-member and the name of a cult, chances are you will find at least one ex-member speaking out about it on here. Number 4 is current members of the group in question. Number 5 is their own observations of the group and their child, how the group treats their child, what the group expects of their child, etc. And then number 6 is that child or person, for example. Again, this does not only apply to parents and children, although we do need it to very much so. It also applies to those of us out here doing what I'm doing right now and then trying to get people out of these things. Parents should consider and evaluate information from all of these sources. Each has its strong and weak points, as everything does, right? Although publications produced by the group in question may be self-serving, they may nonetheless help parents better understand what their child believes and may prepare them to discuss those beliefs at the appropriate time. You can't really question beliefs if you don't understand them, right? Outside written analysis of the group can be very valuable if they are not biased or sensational. Cult watcher organizations and individuals sometimes have information that has not made its way into the public arena, although they do have a tendency to collect mainly critical information and therefore may not present a rounded picture of the group in question. Ex-members, not all of whom are categorically critical of their groups, frequently have a uniquely valuable understanding of the group. Conversations with current members can be useful, not only because of the information they provide, but also because talking with them will give parents and advocates an opportunity to study the group's communication methods and other practices. These kinds of parental and advocate observations should be supplemented by analysis of their child's behavior, especially behavior that seems out of character. And lastly, parents should never underestimate the value of information that their own child can provide. If anything, that is the most important information. If you're trying to get someone out of a cult, their opinions and views and how they feel about it all and what they believe in with it and all that. That's the most important information. And then it says, unfortunately, once parents do become concerned, their emotions often get in the way of communicating with their child or taking advantage of other information sources. For this reason, learning how to communicate effectively and to deal with emotions are the first challenges most cultist parents confront. And that's why I said, I know you're frustrated if you think your kid has been in a cult, and you're upset and emotions are high, but you really do have to kind of take those emotions out of it, if you will. Hi, Queen of Boyd, cool Nicole. You're quoting an article. I am. I am. This is very important. Communication. Very important step as well. For parents whose child may be a victim of cultic relationships, effective communication demands 4 types of skills. All communication demands these skills, and if more people would use all 4 of these skills, that would be amazing. Number 1 is listening. Number 2 is saying what one means, like just coming out with it. Number 3 is controlling your emotions. And number 4 is thinking of methods to overcome communication barriers. Listening. Most people don't realize that listening is a skill. They mistakenly believe that listening merely means not interrupting or hearing what another says. But effective listening entails much more than that. It also involves understanding unspoken or garbled messages, clarifying messages received from the other person, emphasizing with the emotional aura surrounding many messages, and helping the other person express himself more accurately and completely. The message intended often differs from the message received. Consider an example. A child comes home and enthusiastically tells his father that the Divine Light Mission group he is associating with is teaching him to hear divine music by sticking his fingers in his ears. His father may listen calmly to the story, refrain from interrupting, and be able to repeat everything word for word. However, as soon as his son finishes, father snaps. All you're hearing is the blood rushing through your ears. Although the father's explanation may be correct, his listening skills need improvement. Okay, Dad? Jeez. He ignored the emotional aura surrounding his child's report. His son is excited about this group. Perhaps he has been lonely and now feels accepted. Perhaps their talk of divine music and other spiritual matters makes him feel special, or it gives him a good excuse for avoiding life challenges that are causing him difficulty. Moreover, the father's response probably would elicit a defense reaction in his child, like he's calling me stupid again, thereby closing off further communication rather than facilitating it. That's the other thing. Then the kid won't want to come home and tell you anything else, right? And you want your kids to tell you. You should always have an open communication with your kids. Your kids should always feel like you're the one that they should come to with anything. They should never feel too scared or too nervous to come and talk to you about anything. So if you're having that type of reaction to them, then they're going to get scared. They're not going to want to come and tell you about the next time that they learn how to listen to music through their foot. And then what? Then it says the father should have put aside his scientific critique and concentrated on bringing out the unarticulated thoughts and emotions that energized his son's brief lecture on divine music. Father might merely have said, "You seem pretty excited about this group." Such a statement would have communicated, because open ended statements are always better, by the way. "I hear and respect the emotion that motivated you to tell me about divine music. Tell me more." At an appropriate time, father might have added something like, "Have you considered other explanations for your experience?" You know, like it's just the blood rushing through your ears. Don't say that part, but like again, as I explained earlier, it's you putting that thought into their head. So when you say, have you considered other explanations for your experience? It makes them go, huh, am I hearing something else when I put? And then when they do figure it out, it's them that figured it out. See, you may have implanted a little seed, but this is why it's an easier way to do it, because then they feel like they came to that conclusion, right? And obviously, if you're joining a cult, you want to feel validated that you're able to make these decisions. Through a kind of Socratic dialogue, Father might then have helped his son realize that the sound in his ears need not necessarily be divine music. And then, of course, excuse me, sorry. If the group could be wrong about that claim, it could be wrong about others. Do you see? And then you can slowly kind of keep doing that with different things. And then the child or the other person you're talking to, if you're an advocate talking to an adult, for example, you can do the same thing. Like I said, they feel like they've come to those conclusions. If anything, it's just like lighting a match and lighting a little fire with their critical thinking skills for them. By expressing a non-threatening interest, the father could have created an opportunity to collect information about the group and his son's relationship to it, as well as to offer opinions that, coming in a respectful context, would be more likely to be greeted with openness and respect. This is not manipulative. Okay? Not manipulative. It is instead what good listening is all about. A good listener doesn't leap to conclusions. He listens much more than he lectures. Saying what one means. Now, I'm just going to bring up the fact that I am an expert. I am an expert. Right. I hope I'm right. I hope I'm right. I try to be right about this type of thing. But I am a kind of an expert of saying what one means. Parents should not only strive to understand what their child is trying to communicate implicitly and explicitly, they should also endeavor to ensure that their child understands what they are trying to communicate. They should not assume that because they have spoken, their child has understood. Sometimes the children don't understand what they're really saying, right? Parents may not clearly express their intended meaning. In the example cited above, father may intend to draw out his son's feelings and explore the emotional aura of the son's statement. If, however, father says, "Why do you like this group so much?" instead of, "You seem pretty excited about this group," he may fail to achieve his objective because his son may mistakenly infer that the why question really means, how the hell can a supposedly intelligent person like such a weird group? And the message intended then is not the message received. Right? You have to be very careful because kids are going to internalize everything and then they get defensive or they rebel, right? Especially teenagers. And that's why I said you have to try to bring this up in a way so that they cannot in any way feel defensive. It's very hard to do, but you can do it. I believe in the parents of the world. Then it says parents may also obscure their intended message with I'm never going to say that word right, tangential issues, which can sometimes be destructive to the communication process. Father, for example, might say, "You seem pretty excited about that group, just like Jeff, the older brother, when he joined the fraternity." Jeff's having joined a fraternity is irrelevant to drawing out the son's feelings. It may, in fact, be destructive because the DLM son thinks that joining a fraternity is dumb and resent his father's comparison. Or maybe the son and the brother don't have a great relationship, and then it looks like you're just comparing him to his older brother, and he's not going to like that, right? Parents may neutralize their intended message by non-verbally communicating a message that contradicts the verbal message. Thus, father may say, "You seem pretty excited about that group," while he taps his finger on the table, a signal which the entire family interprets as, "I'm angry." The son may interpret these contradictory messages as saying, I challenge you to justify your excitement about that group. The son may then prepare to do battle rather than communicate. Again, be defensive or rebel. Obviously, these illustrations are simplified. Communicating effectively is much more difficult than most people realize. Therefore, parents experiencing conflict with a child should be open to studying the communication process, either by reading or by getting professional help. There is family counseling or communication workshops one can do. Excuse me, sorry. And I highly recommend looking into that, especially if you really do think that your kid is in a cult. You probably should reach out for some professional help to help you with this, right? Controlling emotions is the next one. It is a truism that life would be worth living without emotions. Okay. But sometimes emotion can get in the way, especially in conflict situations. As someone who is extremely emotional, they're right. Lisa has been attending weekly meetings of a group that worships an Indian guru. Okay. Not really sure why we had to bring culture or race into this, but sure then. Whatever. Okay. Her mother reads a magazine article about the cult leader Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, an Indian guru who advocates free love. Knowing nothing about Indian gurus, mother assumes that a guru is a guru is a guru. You want to believe that. I mean, some of that's true. They all kind of use the same manipulation tactics, but yeah, they're not all the same. Images of a promiscuous pregnant daughter begin to dance about in her mind. Her heart palpitates, her hands shake. Oh my God, Lisa's in a cult. Mother spends the afternoon worrying about Lisa, imagining all kinds of catastrophic scenarios. Lisa comes home from supper, mentally exhausted by a difficult organic chemistry exam in the pre-med program in which she is enrolled. Because again, they prey on university students, unknown to mother. Lisa hasn't thought about the guru who advocates chastity for days, doesn't find him appealing, and is even losing interest in the fellow who brought her to the meetings in the first place. Lisa is more concerned about getting into medical school. Mother, who has always been a nervous type, mows down Lisa with a volley of accusations and demands that she stop attending the meetings. Now, let's assume that Lisa is not easily ruffled, sincerely loves her mother, and has good insight into the communication process. Lisa may sigh and then think to herself, what in the world has gotten into mother now? And in an attempt to understand mother's garbled message, say, Mom, tell me what's upsetting you. Thanks to Lisa's patience and understanding, Mom, after letting it all out, comes to realize that Lisa is in no danger. False alarm, no great harm done. Now, this is the scary part. Suppose that Lisa is insecure and resentful about having to live at home. Her reaction to mother's barrage would probably be much different. A fight would erupt. Lisa would tell mother not to try to run her life. Mother would interpret Lisa's emotionalism and irrationality as a sure sign that she is in a cult and brainwash. Mother's fear and Lisa's resentment would grow. False alarm, much harm done. Consider another example. Rhonda. I don't know why, but every time I see that name, I feel like I gotta read it like Rhonda. Rhonda belongs to an obscure sheep herding group that is clearly a destructive cult. Remember, we talked about not all of them are destructive, apparently, but this one is. Her shepherd took all her money and ordered her to drop out of school, cut off communications with her friends, and not see her parents. Yes, that is definitely very destructive. Through an acquaintance, she receives news that her younger sister Sandy has Hodgkin's disease. Aw, Rhonda, this is even a real story, and I'm sad. Rhonda disobeys her shepherd and comes home to visit, terrified that God will punish her for her transgression. Mother, in this case, is not a nervous type. She is cool, calm, and collected. Father, on the other hand, can't control his temper. As soon as Rhonda walks through the door, he starts. You're uncaring. You're a hypocrite. How can you act like this towards us? Your sister needs you, and you waste your time obeying that goddamn tyrant. Lisa's fear mounts. The devil is in this household. She hurries back to her shepherd, grateful for the punishment he inflicts on her. Meanwhile, Mother, realizing that Father's emotion blew a golden opportunity, loses her temper. Mother and Father fight, Sandy gets depressed, and Rhonda continues to submit to her shepherd. Such out of control parental anger and fear can cause much damage during all phases of cult involvement. So, what can parents do? They can view emotional responses as learned behavior rather than mysterious invasive forces. They can then try to modify their characteristic emotional responses in the same way that other learned behaviors can be modified. First, they can identify the types of situations in which disturbing emotions may arise. This is easier said than done, for we are of 10 much less aware of our emotions than we think. How many times have we seen or been involved in this situation? Spouse A grumbles, spouse B says, "What are you mad about?" Spouse A screams, "I'm not mad." Spouse A, who is obviously angry, is either lying or unaware. It is difficult to increase awareness of your emotional reactions simply through willpower. Generally, the awareness grows most readily through systemic practice. At first, it is easier to try the retrospective approach. Keep a diary in which you can describe and analyze emotional situations. What was the context, your thoughts, your feelings? Very often, there is a one-to-one correspondence between thoughts and feelings. If you interpret a situation as threatening, psychologically or physically, you will feel anxiety. If you interpret an event as a loss or as a defeat, you will feel sadness. If you interpret an event as an assault on your values, you will feel anger. Clearly, if your appraisal of a situation is incorrect, like in Lisa's mother's case, you will experience inappropriate and sometimes destructive emotions. Hence, in writing your diary, keep asking the questions: was my appraisal of the situation correct? What alternative appraisals could I have considered? As you become more aware of past emotion inducing situations, you become better able to predict future ones. You can then prepare for such situations by mentally rehearsing alternate ways of dealing with them. And then when you keep doing this, it can help you identify and practice constructive responses to emotional inducing situations. But often the real thing is a lot harder to master. You should use cues to increase the likelihood of your remembering constructive responses. Gradually, through the use of systemic introspection, mental rehearsal of constructive responses, and cues, you can modify disruptive emotional responses. If you are also collecting valid information and communicating effectively with your child, you will be in a much better position to help him make an informed reevaluation of his cult involvement. Overcoming communication barriers, sometimes even when parents have a rapport with their child and possess good communication skills, communication is difficult because circumstances or the cult interfere. If, for example, your child lives in a cult residence, he may not be given messages, or he may be kept so busy working that he never has time for you, or he may be indoctrinated to believe that you are of the devil and should be avoided. Sometimes, in fact, he may be sent away with no notice of where he has gone, and in some groups, he may hear lurid stories about parents who had their child abducted and deprogrammed. In considering these barriers, it is important not to let your frustration and anger impair your judgment. No matter how unfair the barrier may seem to you, it is real and it must be dealt with. A cut your losses attitude can often be helpful. Such an attitude acknowledges the barrier's reality and induces you to focus on what you can do to diminish harm rather than set things right. In other words, don't lose your cool and try to make the best of a bad situation. Treat the communication barrier as a problem to be solved, preferably, if possible, with the participation of your child. Define clearly what the problem is. Analyze the factors contributing to the problem. Ask your child what possible solutions he can think of, then offer some of your own. By solving with your child, you not only increase the likelihood of coming up with a solution, but you also increase the likelihood of his realizing or not being able to rationalize the cult's interfering with your communications should such interference occur. Lastly, parents should try to appreciate their child's perspective, no matter how manipulated he may seem to them. To him, his perceptions are true. Very, very important. And that's why I said at the beginning of this, when it comes to people with schizophrenia, like, you can't just let them know that their hallucinations aren't real, right? So it's a hard thing. They believe in it. It's real to them. Very often, one of the most troublesome perceptions interfering with communication is the fear of an involuntary deprogramming. And, we should never be doing that. As parents stereotype cults stereotype parents and advocates. Trust me, we're haters. Furthermore, especially in a destructive group, negative stereotyping of parents and others in the outside world magnifies group cohesiveness by generating a we they mentality. And that's the most scary thing, is when your child or a loved one or even anyone gets into a cult, all of them seem to have a we they mentality. And that's what makes it so hard. Like the beginning of this said, the cults are very good at coming out with ways to make it so that you don't listen to anyone outside of the cult, right? Look at the bite model and information control and behavior control and likes. Parents should try to respond, not react to this we they mentality and the deprogramming fears which it frequently engenders. Treat it as a communication barrier, a problem to be solved. If parents have a reasonable level of rapport with their child, it rarely hurts to ask bluntly, "Are you seeing us less because you are afraid of deprogramming?" If the child answers yes, you can tell him that you're not planning a deprogramming. If he seems skeptical, ask him for suggestions on what you can do to reassure him. Perhaps you can meet more often on neutral ground, like at a restaurant, a public place. If you are thereby able to overcome a fear of deprogramming, you will most likely improve your rapport with your child and increase the likelihood that he will agree to hear the other side of the story by speaking voluntarily with critics of the group. In other words, if you agree to assuage his fears, he may later reciprocate by talking to a third party in order to assuage your fears about his welfare. Modeling. Thus far, I have discussed procedures for collecting information and building trust through effective communicating. In attempting to accomplish these goals, you should keep in mind that you are a model for your child. If in your communication with your child, you show a willingness to admit error, your child becomes more likely to own up to his mistakes and misconceptions. That's why we do a lot of self deprecating humor here. In the communication process, you will also have an opportunity to model a willingness to negotiate and compromise. In so doing, you are showing your capacity to change, which will make it easier for your child to change. Very often, people expect the other guy to change first. This strategy may work if the other person does in fact change first. But if he is too waiting for the other person to change first, then nobody's changing here, okay? We're just all the same. It is important, therefore, to abide by what behavior therapist Richard Stewart in 1980 calls the change first principle. In a conflict relationship, each party should take responsibility for initiating change in himself rather than waiting for the other person to change. This is especially important in a cult situation because the child or member, especially if he's an adolescent or young adult, is not likely to think of or pay heed to the change first principle. Kids don't know about this. The parent must act first. In so doing, the parent models flexibility, openness, and rationality, all of which are essential to a cultist's voluntary reevaluating a cult involvement. Education. When parents establish a trusting relationship with a child in a cult, he is more likely to be willing to examine information that is critical of the group to which he belongs, or that raises questions about his relationship to the group. Books, articles, videotapes, and conversations with ex-cultists or professionals can all be very helpful in getting the cultist to listen to the other side of the story and or take a closer look at the motivations and consequences of his cult affiliation. Unfortunately, considering information critical of the cult will not necessarily, in and of itself, bring about a sincere reevaluation. The credibility a convert attributes to such information can vary. Therefore, timing is a crucial factor in attempts to educate a cultist. If, for example, a child is just flirting with a cultic group or has not yet had time to internalize its beliefs and practices, he is much more likely to believe critical information. If, however, the cultist is acculturated, example, he has internalized the cult's belief system and practices, he is much more likely not to attribute credibility to non-cult sources of information, again, due to Stephen Hassan's bite model. He'll probably not want to know any of that information at all. In this case, even if a growing trust in his parents renders him willing to expose himself to critical information, the child may not be moved by that information. And honestly, this is why I like that there are r/anti-MLM videos. I feel like the youth, when they watch a lot of those, they get the message and it's in a way that they can laugh at it and whatnot. Because getting a teenager to watch this video, for example, wouldn't happen. You know what I'm saying? At least most of them would be very bored, I feel like. Parents faced by such circumstances should try to understand the child's perspective rather than interpret his skepticism as a betrayal of the trust they have worked so hard to build. He simply no longer sees the world as they do or as he once did. Parents will probably find it more productive to be patient and to discuss with their child how people come to attribute credibility to information sources. This may get him thinking on a different track, so to speak, and may in time make him more inclined to believe non-cult sources of information. Strategy. Figure 2 illustrates the field of forces impinging on a cult convert. By understanding and helping their child understand this field of forces, parents can more effectively persuade their child to reevaluate a harmful or potentially harmful cult involvement. I am sure that all of you can hear my daughter and husband playing in the background. They're playing games, don't mind them. Joe says parents never make mistakes. Parents always make mistakes. We are not perfect people. No, you couldn't get a normal teenager to watch this. Well, see, and that's the thing is a lot of normal teenagers, they wouldn't be into watching a lot of the like cult deep dives and stuff unless they were a weird teenager like me and they're very much into the occult, right? So the r/anti-MLM videos or just quick little videos explaining it is a great idea. And I also still think that we need to be more like Japan and do the orientations at the schools and educate as much as we can. So parents concerned that their child belongs to a destructive group tend to focus their attention on the manipulative practices of the group. Although it is important to do this, parents should not A, assume that the manipulative pull is the same in all groups, right? Because they're not. And B, ignore other factors that may influence their child's behavior, feelings, thoughts. This here is figure 2. So we have mainstream world with family, school, work, friends, pleasures and goals, interest and intimacy, appeal, manipulative pull, repulsion, cult convert, developmental or psychological history, strengths, weaknesses, attitudes, and values, problem solving style, perceptions of mainstream world. Then under cult environment, we have manipulative factors, positive factors, corruption, escape from mainstream. It's a great tool to use. The convert lacks confidence in his capacity to make it in the mainstream world, repulsion arrow, and is sincerely attached to fellow cultists. Becoming aware of the cult's manipulations could thrust him into a quaternary. Fear and resentment if he stays in the cult. Fear, a sense of loss, and second guessing if he leaves. And this is why people get stuck there. Focusing solely on manipulation can be counterproductive for other reasons as well. First of all, the group in question may not be all that manipulative. In such cases, elaborating the manipulation theme may undermine the parent's credibility and may blind them and the convert to the real reasons for his affiliation. So you don't want to automatically just be like, oh, he just got manipulated into it. The best way is to actually find out what it is about the cult that this kid really likes about it, right? Like, why did he join it? Him specifically. Everyone has a different reason. Everybody's different. Make it very specific to the person, the child. Secondly, the convert may be afraid to confront the reality of cultic manipulations, but may be willing to discuss other factors affecting his behavior. And thirdly, even if an awareness of cultic manipulations leads to a convert's departure from the group, he may, after leaving, find himself very troubled and lacking the support of his parents. And we have an issue with that here in the anti-MLM community, where we have a community that is not very good at taking in people that are very troubled, that have very severe mental health issues due to being in cults, in MLMs, and supporting them. I think that's one of the worst things that our community does is we want the recovery from MLMs and cults to look pretty, to not be messy. And that's just not the case. It's very messy. There's days of screaming and crying and being triggered. And I think not talking about that or hiding these things and hiding how the recovery actually is doing all of us a disservice. But again, what do I know? I'm just some bitch here on the internet. So they may find themselves very troubled and lacking the support of parents or advocates who are not aware of and have not helped him become aware of the other factors affecting his condition, like other mental health things, like how I did a whole video about how leaving MLMs can re-trigger your trauma from being abused in your past. You got to look at things like that outside of just the MLM and see how that's affecting you as well, and then also recover from that. Consequently, as much as possible, Parents should help their child understand all the factors. An often neglected factor, and one that is relatively easy to explore once trust and communication are high, is repulsion from the cult environment. Cult environment repulsion arrow. If your child is willing to discuss his doubts, resentments, fears, and other misgivings about the cult, be careful not to unintentionally discourage him. That's exactly what you want. If anything, you want to encourage that and explore it with him. Cultivate a listening posture by letting him lead, asking questions in a gentle, encouraging manner, and resisting the temptation to lecture him or worse, berate him by saying something such as, "I told you so, you dummy." If he is troubled, if he trusts you, and if you are patient, you may be surprised by how much comes out. And the more, the better, because the more information you know, the easier it will be for you to help him leave. Also surprising to many parents, but in a negative sense, is the extent to which the child may sincerely like certain aspects of the cult. Vocational opportunities, friendships, meditation, living in a calm, non-rat race environment, and other features of the cult may all have a genuine appeal, even if they are tainted by negative features, such as deception, group pressures, and etc. Acknowledging these positive features, however, is not a defeat. You always have to look at a cult in the view of the people that are in it and say to yourself, what is it about this that makes it so that these guys want to join? What are the good things? What are the things that when you're in this cult, you would be happy to have around you? If you can't understand those things, then it's very hard to get people out of cults. You have to know what brought them there and what they enjoy about it that keeps them there. If that makes sense. I hope that makes sense. Anyway, it may, on the contrary, be a victory. Your credibility can be enhanced. If your child sees you as more credible, he will be more likely to pay heed to your critical opinions. Acknowledging the positive doesn't necessarily mean that the benefits in question don't have a high price or that they couldn't be obtained outside the cult. And that's another thing. So, like, for example, in an MLM, if it's the products, find products that are not sold by the MLM. If it is the community, find ways that person can find a better community, if you will. That sort of thing. That's important to do. You cannot ever just remove someone from a cult and then be like, okay, thanks. Glad you left. Bye. See you later. And that, again, is one of the issues of our community, is that we tend to do that. We go, oh, congrats. Oh, now you've left. Okay. Do you want to advocate with us? No. Okay. Well, just watch the videos and hang out then. And then that's it. There's nothing else. And we're doing a disservice with that, in my opinion. But again, what do I know? I'm just some bitch on the internet. Helping your child understand this may enable him to recognize alternative ways of conducting his life. I know, for example, of former Hare Krishnas who have continued to meditate and adhere to a vegetarian diet after leaving the Krishnas. They rejected the cult of authoritarianism may all have a genuine appeal, even if they are tainted by negative features such as deception and behavioral peculiarities. But, yeah, sure, I can say that word. That word I can say, but retained that which they found beneficial. And they did this without rejecting their family's college, a normal career, etc. Sorry. The cultist's confidence in his capacity to cope with the mainstream world and his ability to recognize and resist manipulation may all be affected by the strengths and weaknesses of his personality, his attitudes and values, his perceptions of the mainstream world, his coping style, and his psychodevelopmental history. Although the majority of cultists appear to be relatively normal, approximately 1/3 to 1/2 report having experienced serious psychological difficulties prior to joining their cult. They prey on people that have psychological difficulties, which is why, once again, in this community, if you see somebody that is having psychological difficulties after leaving a cult, please do not attack them. Please do not judge them. Please do not shaft them. That is not going to ever help anybody. If parents are not sensitive and advocates are not sensitive to such pre-cult difficulties, they may seriously impede the helping process, which is why our community should really learn how to work with people with severe mental health issues when they leave cults. I'm just saying. Therefore, it is important that parents try to understand what has gone on and is going on inside their child. Does he have developmental problems, like a fear of dating, vocational confusion? Did he set such high and rigid standards, possibly an emulation of his parents, that pre-cult life became like a guitar string tightened to the point of snapping? Is he characteristically unassertive, unable to say no, especially to people who seem nice? That is an issue that I had because of my mental health disorder. I had an inability to say no. I had to really work on that. When I left MLMs, I had to understand that a very big part of why I joined was because I had an inability to say no. And these are things that, again, you have to pay attention to when working with people who are in cult. Do they have trauma from their past? Then they probably do have an inability to say no. Knowing all that can help them here. Did he show a naive idealism or a cynical disillusionment with the world, either of which could open him up to utopian movements? The incels are in trouble. Was he prone to more than normal depressions? Did or does he lack self-esteem? Did or does he tend to withdraw from difficulties rather than attempt to master them? Such questions can be multiplied 100-fold. Although only a few questions may be pertinent in any one case, those few may be extremely important for parents and activists seeking to help a person voluntarily reevaluate his cult involvement. You need to study people's psychological makeup, because that will enhance not only the understanding of the cult's appeal, manipulative pull, and repulsion, but also of the mainstream world's appeal, manipulative pull, and repulsion. Very important. Parents with a child in a destructive cult can easily overlook those things in the world that appeal to him and can grossly underestimate his fears about the world. And as noted earlier, can be tempted to use the same unethical manipulations they criticize in the cult. And all of that would be awful. Don't do that. That's not good. If advocates and parents have a good understanding of the field of forces affecting their child or any person, and if they have sufficient rapport and communication skills, they will be in a good position to help their child or anyone else understand the many factors affecting their behavior, feelings, and thoughts. By making people more aware, you make them more free in a psychological sense. Stanford University psychologist Albert Bandura says that freedom is determined by the number of options available to people and the right to exercise them. The more behavioral alternatives and social prerogatives people have, the greater is their freedom of action. And that's kind of an important quote. So one of the things that we've been failing to do, I feel they do look crazy targets. Sorry, I'm laughing. Joe says, a cult of incels. That's a scary thought. I think I already have one following me around, Joe. I think there's already one out here. But this is all very important. And I do think that our anti-call, anti-MLM community here, we fail at this. about viewing the mainstream world, about seeing why people would be scared to be in that world, about really getting to the nitty-gritty as to why people are joining these things. I think we have to do better than that. And if we're not willing to sit down and look at ourselves and what we're doing out here and look at how we can do it better, then we don't have a right to be out here. Don't even try with the community, because what you would be doing is harming instead of helping. Understand? Okay, cool. Very important. In trying to persuade their child or anyone else to voluntarily reevaluate its cult involvement, parents and advocates are attempting to ensure that these people are as free as they realistically could be. The convert who sees limited alternatives because of cultic manipulations or personal fears is not truly free. Or of other people on the internet constantly attacking them for leaving the cult, they're not truly free. Even though he may make what are subjectively free choices, his situation is analogous to a person wearing blinders and strapped to a wall such that he cannot turn his head. This person may see 3 windows in front of him and may be able to choose to look through any one of them, but his inability to move his head and the restricted field of vision resulting from the blinders render him unaware of 6 other windows in the room. These windows do not exist for him, but they exist for unhampered observers, such as his parents or us advocates out here. By taking off the person's blinders and releasing him from wall straps, these observers enable the person to choose from 9 windows instead of 3. The subjective feeling of choice may be the same, but the choice is much richer. If the unfettered individual decides to look through the same window he chose while strapped to the wall, he at least has made an informed decision. If he decides to look through one of the windows he had previously been unable to see, he has made not only an informed decision, but for him, a better decision as well. It's one thing to help people get out of cults, but if you're not going to help them see the mainstream world outside of that cult as better around them, you are doing a great disservice. Because then, yes, you've gotten them out of the cult, but then they're just going to join another one. And that could be why we often see people going from cult to cult to cult, or from MLM to MLM, or MLM, you know? I know, and I hope Mrs. Wonderful is with the other one, and then we can just hook up a few more, because, they called child services again and said that we were selling our daughter to predators online, so that was fun. So let's get that all dealt with. Anyway, that was very important, I felt. I have been wanting to do a stream for a long time talking about children in cults. I have come out and very bravely, by the way, admitted that the MLM cults have made me use my child for ads and whatnot. It's a hard thing to do, to come out and admit that. But if us parents cannot come out here in the world and admit that and talk about how they talked us into doing that, the manipulation tactics, why we told ourselves that was okay, and then how we got out of doing that, how are we supposed to help other people? We can't. And that's why I did that. I think it's very important that if you have left a cult and you're in so-called recovery, that you don't do toxic positivity and make it look beautiful. I'm not very good at that. If I'm having a hard day, you will know. I also think it's very important that we start looking at ways that we can better teach our youth. Maybe if I had known about cults more growing up, I wouldn't have joined 2 MLMs after pretty much leaving a religious one. Life could have been a lot better for me if I had the warning. I really do like how Japan is doing this youth pamphlet and passing it out. I really do like how they're doing an orientation at colleges and universities. And I really think that as a community, that should be something that we are all trying to get done here in all of the other countries. Because once again, Japan is ahead of us. Um, I think it would be amazing. And I think that it's important that as parents, we educate ourselves on cults and the science and how to help our kids out of them. I thought that was a really great article that gave some amazing, fabulous advice by someone with a PhD in this to teach us how to help our children. But of course, if you do find your child in a cult or you think that they might be in a cult, please do reach out for professional help. There are agencies out there that can help you. I do not recommend trying to do this just kind of on your own, you and your child, because as you saw, it's a very extensive thing. You have to be careful of a lot. And I do think that reaching out to a professional to help you would be the smartest thing to do. They can help guide you through this process with your child and ensure that you don't make some of the mistakes that we just discussed here, because none of us are perfect, right? To pretend that we're perfect is a disservice here. We are all going to get a little emotional if this comes up in our lives. It is very hard to be a parent and to watch your kid go into a cult, for example, and feel hopeless. Being emotional would be a completely normal thing. But again, you have to then be careful of how those emotions are handled when you talk about it. And I just think that reaching out to a professional, even if not with your kid, but even just you on your own, to talk to somebody and let them know what you're seeing, ask them how you could, approach this with your kid better. That is always very, very smart thing to do. You could never have too much help from a professional, especially when dealing with your child. All right. You don't want to fuck up your kid. So make sure you get some professional help. That's all there is for me today. My husband has been making me food this whole time. I hear the oven beeping. I want to go play some games and hang out with my family and whatnot, especially after just reading all this about kids. I miss mine now. I've been away from her for like 2 hours. It sucks. Please do give the video a like, subscribe if you are new here. I would love it if you joined our fabulous, amazing members. All of the people that are beautiful do. I mean, Joe is just gorgeous. So make sure that you come and join. You don't want to be ugly like that dude that was running that Japanese cult, okay? Not a looker. Disgusting human being on the inside and out. You don't want to be like him. So hit that join button. Please, again, I'm just going to say it. Make sure that if you are seeing these warning signs, you get professional help. Please. And then sit down and have a talk with your kids. And I don't know, let me know if you want to help me figure out in future how we can maybe get a program so that all the kids everywhere can have that similar to Japan, I think that would be good. And no matter where you are, what you're doing, I hope that you all have a fabulous rest of your day. Take care. I am going to be doing a stream tomorrow in which we are going to be talking about Hillsong, which is the cult that got Justin Bieber. And several famous people right now in Hollywood are being accused. And Chris Evans claims he's not in it, but reason to believe he is. And we need to talk about it because there's some stuff going on with it. And I thought now is a better time than any. And then either tomorrow or Friday, I am going to have an update on the 5D Full Disclosure Love Has Won Joy Reigns cult. It's an important update that horrifies me, so I need to share it with everyone. So there'll be lots of great content coming up. Don't you worry. And I will see you all tomorrow. With that, take care. Have a great rest of the day. And remember, just don't join a fucking cult.